Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, has briefed the media on the way forward for the Government of National Unity. My colleague, SABC News reporter Bulelani Phillip, attended the briefing and joins us now. Good afternoon, Bulelani. What has come out of the briefing about the priorities of the 7th administration and how they're going to be distributing and sharing responsibility, particularly for the advancement of the country?
Well, good afternoon to you, Diwabo, and to the viewers at home. Of course, what is going to happen going forward is that the government has to come up with these government priorities that will be able to drive the country forward. Of course, technically, the Forum for the Directors General will be trying to actually get the priorities of the different political parties so that when the government goes into this cabinet government Lekgotla next week, then they will be able to try and sift what will be the government priorities going forward. But of course, joining me now is the Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, to just explain to us how this process will unfold. Next week, you're going to this government Lekgotla. What will you be hoping to achieve there?
So this is the first Lekgotla of government. As you are aware, the President will be then doing the opening of Parliament, where he's going to articulate the priorities of the 7th administration. To get to that, to the priorities of the 7th administration, will then go into the Lekgotla that will, as ministers and deputy ministers and premiers of provinces and the representatives of municipalities will then, and traditional leaders will then have to agree on what are these priorities that we are setting out. What will inform the priorities? It's the manifestos of the different parties that are signatories to the statement of intent or who are parties to the GNU. And from then, in how do we filter the priorities, which is the work the Director Generals are already doing. Immediately the statement of intent got signed, they got to work to start to prepare for us to get to have a document ready. Then they use the National Development Plan to say, we have Vision 2030 that we all collectively agreed in 2012 as South Africans that that's the vision we want to attain. And those, if priorities of the ANC, for example, do not help us as government to achieve the Vision 2030 or the priorities, the objectives and the goals of the NDP, that priority will fall away. Similarly, it will apply to all the parties as a filtering mechanism. I'm sure because there's a particular number that we agree that says performance managers will say people can only implement up to X. They'll then say what was the next criteria they've used to eliminate so that they can remain with what we call core or critical, or in terms of the statement of intent is the minimum program of action. That's what they're going to propose. When we have agreed on that at the Lekgotla, we get to work to compile what is called the Medium-Term Strategic Framework, or MTSF. That MTSF is the one that informs the annual budgets as approved and determined by National Treasury in consultation with Cabinet. And the departments will then go back home and start, when the MTSF is agreed, they develop strategic plans. And they develop, from a strategic plan, it's a 5-year plan of a department specific. MTSF is government-wide, strategic plan is department-wide, but for 5 years. And then you have what you call annual plans that are derived from there. Those annual plans then get submitted to the DPME, who will check the alignment with the strategic plans with the MTSF, what the MTSF said we must all collectively achieve. In that alignment, then would they say it's fine, Mr. President and Cabinet, or it's not fine, these departments must go and change, or we have sent them to go and change. And when that is agreed, the National Treasury will then fund the annual performance plans of departments from the budget. So that's how it works. DPME also comes back and receive monthly and quarterly reports, which are also submitted to Parliament in terms of performance of departments towards their annual performance plans and consolidate upwards towards the performance on attaining the MTSF goals and objectives. And they go back to Parliament and go back to Cabinet and say, this is how we are performing, this is who's failing to perform. And the President announced the performances.
Now, let's come to the issue of how the ministers, particularly those that come from the opposition, are going to be regulated by the cabinet processes. You saying that no minister would be allowed to go it alone. They still need to consult cabinet. Let's say, for example, if some political party wakes up tomorrow and say, let's privatize Eskom, so that we can give an example how that will be regulated within cabinet.
I don't know whose opposition party, because the ANC will equally...
Well, the other parties that are not the ANC, let's put it that way.
No, but that's what you are missing. There's a government of national unity. The ANC, the DA, Inkatha Freedom Party, the PAC, the UDM, Rise Mzansi, PA, I must recall all of them now because I must call Good, not Al Jamal.
I think the point here, Minister, is the fact that, you all have different policy positions on certain things going into this government of national unity. Now, the question that I'm trying to ask is whether will those parties be able to implement their own policies if they want to?
But I've indicated the Directors General are working on the manifestos of all political parties that are in the GNU. They're not working on an ANC manifesto. They're not working on a DA manifesto. They're not working on an IFP. They've scoured through all the manifestos of the 11 parties and put a proposal. I haven't seen the proposals, only saw it yesterday. They've put a proposal to say, the ministers or Lekgotla, these are the proposals, this is what we have taken. And they don't have to say we've taken from the ANC, from the IFP, from whoever. They said this is what we have taken from the manifestos. And that's why we're saying, ministers, because you know you are deployed in parliament by your political parties, and deputy ministers, go and work with your DGs to work on, to ensure that when those priorities come, they come through. We also clarified that it doesn't mean Department of Agriculture is going to implement DA policies. It doesn't mean Department of, which department is with an ANC minister, an implementing department. It doesn't mean the Department of Land and Land Reform and Rural Development is going to implement PAC policies. It doesn't mean Department of Military Veterans is going to implement ANC policies. No, we are going there. When we get together and the MTSF is agreed to, it's a government policy. So if Department of Military Veterans have to implement something that is proposed in a DA manifesto, but has been agreed at the Lekgotla, it will be implemented. It has to be agreed at the Lekgotla. It has to be part of the MTSF. So there's no, because when you say opposition is the EFF and MK and those parties that are not members of the GNU. These ones who are in the GNU were all government. That's why we're called the governing parties.
All right, Minister, let's change the themes here. The future of the state-owned companies, what will be the way going forward, and what will be of the Department of Public Enterprises staff as we transition?
As the President has indicated, and it's not the first articulation announcement, the DPE is closed. And in terms of government process, there's an NMOC process, which is the micro organization of government process, the National Micro Organization of Government process, that immediately the President announced that DPE is going to be closed. DPSA kicks in with the process of closing down that department, determining the future and the state of what will happen to the employees. The President has announced that the SOCs or the functions of the DPE are going to the Presidency, so the NMOC will be adjusted to ensure that in terms of what the functionality, we must wait for the presidential proclamation that assigns roles and responsibilities to the ministers. And when that is done, then there will be an articulation of how those are going to be done. Because if you recall, the other announcement that he had made was that policy departments will remain with the policy functions. So there has to be a rejigging of work. So you need to wait for the proclamation. I'm not the president. I do not know how he has assigned powers and functions to different ministers. The proclamation will come out which says, Minister X, you are responsible for this, or Department X, this is how it's going to be contributed, and this is what it means in the granularity of detail that you said.
All right, thank you so much, Minister in the Presidency, Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, explaining how this program of action of government will be put together going forward. On that note, we cross back to you in studio.
Thanks, Bulelani. I know that our viewers were quite wanting to know, particularly if the different political... We do also apologize for the sound that you heard towards the end of Bulelani's crossing, but I was saying that our viewers had been asking about what kind of policies or whose policies are going to be implemented if the different leaders are going to be carrying through their own implementation of their own policies, and that clarity well received from Minister Ntshavheni speaking to Bulelani.